Okay, welcome back, folks. Next, we're going to hear from the Department for Children and Families. And as the previous witness said, they were a member of the task force and also the abstaining members mostly in terms of the voting. So they had submitted their comments after the report. And so we won't go around and do introductions again because we did that once already, but we welcome Commissioner Winters and Deputy Commissioner Gray here, and the floor is yours. So their comments and stuff are on our committees, each of our committees' web pages. So welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to confirm before. For the record, my name is Chris Winters. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families. And I do want to do, and I'm joined, of course, by Deputy Commissioner Miranda Gray. I have some overall comments about the task force work and report. And then Deputy Commissioner Gray would be happy to go through section by section to speak to our comments on each of these sections. I do want to start out by saying I really appreciate the work of the task force. It was a huge task in a short amount of time. And all the effort and time that those task force members poured into it is really commendable. And as you all know, this is an incredibly complicated issue. There are no easy answers. There are very few quick fixes. And to put something like this report together in the time that they had was an extremely tall task. It was an evolving process throughout. Compiling and reviewing their recommendations, hearing from interested parties, trying to figure out which things they wanted to tackle first to make sure that they got to certain things. And there are plenty of really good recommendations within this task force, and also many that sound good, that I think are very easy to say, but much harder to implement. And there were many times when it was difficult, if not impossible, for the departments, the Department of the Agency of Development, Department of Housing and Conservation and Development to engage, as well as the Department for Children and Families to engage fully, because the departments really have to operationalize these recommendations within this task force report. And, to address the abstentions, there were times when we couldn't offer an opinion. We didn't want to offer an opinion. We didn't want to say no because there were some ideas that were really good and we could possibly agree to, but we did not have enough time to do a fiscal analysis, to do a deeper dive on the practical implications of some of the things recommended here, to take into account the resource limitations that we have, such as the limited number of hotel rooms, of shelter beds, and most importantly, affordable housing, and also the number of positions that it might take to fully implement what's recommended here. So without that analysis, and because votes were taken section by section before a full finalized recommendation, some of those sections were in conflict. The state members chose to abstain from most of the votes, and you'll see that throughout in our comments on the report, even where there might have been, as I said, some support for the recommendations within. We really didn't get into enough detail to really fully understand the issue or provide an informed opinion in support or in opposition. So, it's valuable work. There's so much great information was surfaced, so many great recommendations from highly skilled people with amazing knowledge about housing and homelessness in the state of Vermont. So it's a wonderful contribution to the conversation. Many of these ideas need to be followed up on. But because we didn't have enough information, we did feel like an abstention was more appropriate than just saying no when there were things we possibly would agree with. So putting this together without a full analysis of the cost of the staffing and the resources, we think is something that we could responsibly say yes to. And I think a lot of the thought was that would be up to the legislature to figure out how to fund it, what some of the other practical implications are. So we have to look at our entire programs, we have to look at our budget, we have to look at our positions, and know that if we do something here, it's going to impact other programs that we have over here. So that's my overall general approach to this, and would be happy to answer some questions about that, or Deputy Commissioner Gray can start going the section by section.
Representative Donahue.
Yeah, I want to ask a question that, I read your responses, and I don't want to go back and words the exact charge, but it sounds as if your perception of the work charge was to come up with operational recommendations rather than coming up with, this is what we ought to do, and it's a separate question as to what pieces we can or can't do operationally. I think of it a little bit, we've been doing initial work on saying we need to look at rate setting and what the basis is for setting rates. What is identified as what would be an appropriate rate may not be something we can do, but at least it gives us a baseline at what we should be trying to do. So it sounds to me in contradiction maybe of what I would have thought, or what the rest of the group appeared to think, that your position was you couldn't support something if you couldn't look to the ability to operationalize it in the short term versus a construct of what our goal should be as a state. Is that fair?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Representative Donahue. I think, for example, we should change eligibility. We have the recommendation to change eligibility in some way. And our task force members said, well, let's talk about how much that costs. Let's talk about who else gets pushed out of the program with a limited number of beds, hotel rooms, shelters that we have. But there really wasn't time to kind of do that deeper dive. And there were times when we offered the fiscal analysis, like we're not going to discuss that at this moment. So we could have just said, well, then we oppose because there's these unknown implications of doing this. But what we did instead was say, you'll abstain, and we're happy to do that fiscal analysis and offer an opinion when the bill gets taken up.
Thank you.
That was my question. You indicated at the end that you would do an analysis or some kind of work on the recommendations based on your the draft recommendations. So and I'm also I'm thinking about what you're doing for the report itself, but then I'm also aware that the House Human Services Committee is looking at legislation. So it may be a dual task, but the first will certainly inform the second. So how far along are you in looking through the recommendations and doing some analysis?
It's a work in progress. We tried to give as much information as we could
Yeah.
in the time frame to get this submitted before these committees. So I think we're most of the way there, and we generally speaking, depending on the recommendation, we know what it's going to cost. We know how many beds we have statewide. We can offer opinions there.
Any other questions for the commissioner before the deputy commissioner takes over? Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning. For the record, Miranda Gray, I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Economic Services Division. Would you like me to share, or is everyone all set?
If you're able to share, I think that would be great.
Oh, we have it.
Yes, it's on their website. It's on both committees' websites. Make it a little bit bigger.
See, Zoom is a little bit different for me, so it's hiding.
Under her name, Miranda Gray.
That's a letter from Chris Winter.
There you go. That was-
Okay.
Okay, so,
And I take it.
okay.
No.
Yes, and I do apologize. I am not contagious, just still working through a cold. So I do have cough drops. I will drink water and I might have to pause here and there to catch my breath. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll go similar to Rep. McGill, recommendation by recommendation. But I won't go through what.
Yes.
I'll just get to our responses. So under household eligibility, this is an area that we did abstain. We were not asked for an analysis as what it would mean to add households identified in A, E, or F. And for your reference, that is age 60 years of age or older. That is the difference from the current law where it's 65, and that was the change that happened under Act 113. E, if a youth exiting foster care age 19 to 24 years of age, we would need to understand how large is this population. And F has a disability defined by ADA and all the subsections. These suggested changes would bring an increase to the utilization of the hotel and motel program, coupled with significant budgetary implications. As the program is limited by participating hotels and motels, the expansion of eligibility, as we have seen by adding the form under the Budget Adjustment Act, the 201 GBR, that added a population, but we didn't take a population out. And so we've just increased the number of people looking for the limited number of rooms. Under F, some of these subsections are difficult for us to implement, and we strongly oppose having an employee verifying a disability by observation. This is a problematic use of discretion and also runs counter to how most applicants choose to engage with us, which is over the phone.
I think what we're going to, in the interest of time, I think if folks could, if they have a question about a particular response, write it down, and then this will enable the department to get through all of the responses in the time that we have, and then we would still have some time at the end for questions.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
If you want me to read these, I can use at some point. Your
Okay. Yes.
voice gives out.
Thank you. Then additionally, underneath that, the task force recommends removing the resource entirely so that no savings are taken into consideration. Once again, we abstained, although I would say today. Similarly, we would need to complete an analysis on what it would mean to remove the resource limit. And so there's a budgetary implication. But then there is also the practical implication of we would have people that have the means to pay for their own hotel room would be in a room that economic services would be paying for. And we would have people who are not eligible, who have no savings, who would not be able to access that room that economic services would pay for. The General Assistance Emergency Housing Program is supposed to be the safety net last option program. And so this runs contrary to that definition of the program. Under the maximum days of eligibility, next subsection. Once again, the task force did not seek an analysis of the impacts of this recommendation on the budget, room availability, or services. If this recommendation is implemented for what was suggested, the average, it would give households all 400 days of hotel or motel housing per year. This is inconsistent with the direction of the last two legislative sessions, where the legislature included language in legislation to encourage and require general assistance recipients to seek out and accept other housing options available to them, and other options to have to be utilized in order to resolve the reliance on the hotel and motel usage.
Deputy Commissioner, could I ask
yes, sorry.
to move your slides as you talk? That would be great.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
I
Okay.
said I could do both.
Yeah. I don't know. The commissioner offered to help. I'm just.
Okay. Under the next one, there was no discussion about what protections must be in place. So as you might imagine, and we need to understand what is implied here. What does that mean? And therefore it makes it challenging to vote on or even comment on this item. The department currently works closely with a lot of agencies by both providing funding for their own specific motel pool needs. An example would be sister agencies, as well as ensuring that Vermonters who identify that they could utilize the services of other agencies are referred there. So one of our key components is making sure that our people are connected to other resources, because we do have a network, and sometimes having that connection to community provider provides another connection that will be helpful in moving someone forward. So this would need further clarification. Again, DCF was not asked nor had time to complete an analysis that it would mean to allow households who are found ineligible to continue to occupy rooms while their fair hearing is completed. So fair hearing, just for everyone quickly, is a process. If you don't agree with the decision of the department, you can contest that essentially. And currently you would not be housed while you were going through a fair hearing process. The proposal here was that someone would. DCF estimates that if not all, most households would ask for a fair hearing when deemed ineligible. There's also a strong likelihood, particularly in the winter, that this would keep otherwise eligible households unsheltered, given the lack of space. Program requirements. There was a comment made that income certification being moved to every 90 days would save funding for the administration. And I would say that would also take analysis to see if that would be accurate. And it is inaccurate to assume that people go in and just stay, or that a hotel or motel finds the arrangement to be beneficial to both individuals, and that they wouldn't want to change. We also have households who go and stay at a hotel and would like to move elsewhere. So there is a lot of movement that happens on both parties' requests. This is an example of where voting in pieces, which the commissioner had mentioned, rather than a comprehensive package, was challenging. Just within this task force report, it is in conflict. Here in B, it suggests that income be verified every 90 days. However, in section 8, the recommendation that the department does not support says that there should be no income contribution at all. It is also I won't go into that again. Tied to the 90-day authorization, there's an additional burden that would be placed on the state to understand who has left the hotel and motel to ensure that funds were not being paid to someone who had left. This is a reality. We have people who leave, and we don't always have motel management that notifies us timely. What that means is we're paying for an empty room, rather than being able to get what is now over 600 households that have had no access to a room, into a room. And so this proposal would increase that burden on us, and having to try to figure out how would we manage that. It should also be noted that many hotels and motels that we're working with will only take authorizations for up to a couple days, maybe a week or two at a time. And it is because they need to understand if that relationship is going to work, if they are a good fit for each other. We have some people that we're housing that have pretty significant needs, and they might need additional supports to be able to be successful. And those supports aren't necessarily in these individual hotels and motels. It really depends on what community they're in, and if community partners go into these establishments or not. Sorry, I'm a bit repetitive here, but the department was not asked nor had time to complete an analysis as to what it would mean to determine the scope of work and resources needed to accomplish section coordinated entry. There is also potential resource implication for both economic services, as well as the Office of Economic Opportunity and local shelter providers, as data would be most valuable when collected from both the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program and in shelters to fully understand capacity needs for both shelters and permanent housing options. Without the analysis of the resource implications of the request or the discussion on how to connect this with data requests of shelter providers, the department abstained. The department is unable to provide information on why households exit the program. We have tried numerous times. Clients contact us when they need housing. They don't have to let us know when they're leaving. or why they've left. Overall, while there may be specific elements suggested in this section that the department could support, the lack of analysis and refusal to discuss budgetary implications led the department to abstain. Next section, the budgetary implications of this recommendation may be significant and were not discussed. The department has also testified that there is a difference between the coordinated entry assessment and the homeless management information system and databases that determine eligibility or include necessary components to administer various other programs. This recommendation would require additional resources, either an additional staff to complete the additional data entry or to invest in various IT solutions. So just to note, Economic Services has tried to be in this HMIS system. It doesn't meet any of our needs to be able to produce all the reports, our weekly report that we need to do to be able to communicate with hotels and motels. So essentially it becomes a duplication. We would need to do everything that we need to do so that we could operate our program. And then we would need to enter it into HMIS, which really results in there's one less Vermonter that we're able to take a call from because we are doing this additional data entry, or we would need additional people. And we have explored with ICA, who houses HMIS, to see if there's a way that we can get information in. It would cost approximately $1 million to create this ability to import information, but they would not give us an estimate on when they would make resources available to be able to do this. So this is something, I guess I would just note that we do. For the point in time, the pit count, we are asked to provide information for everybody that we are housing, and it is always a significant lift because it is an additional workload that we need to do, but we have tried. And there is also a pretty significant cost because every single person who's going to enter into the system has to have their own license. So it is something we have tried and just have not been able to find success but continue to explore because we know that there's a desire for all this information. And for others that might not know, HMIS is used by our coordinated entry system to understand and assess everyone that is coming, because Economic Services does not service everyone that might have a homelessness situation. Right. Holding accountability was not defined or discussed. Therefore, the department is unable to share thoughts on this recommendation or analyze the implications of such a change. There are, however, budgetary impacts, including positions that would be needed in order to enter into contracts all of the hotels and motels that participate in the general assistance program. Contracting with hotels may also necessitate the department to pay for empty hotel rooms, as contracts would be for a specific number of rooms at each hotel. It should also be noted that hotels and motels must follow food and lodging regulations. By entering into contracts, this could shift how a motel or hotel is overseen and even how the site must be licensed and zoned, which could add additional costs and other unintended consequences, actually further reducing capacity. Just to quickly note, because I think I skipped over it here. Under number 4, the number and types of emergency shelter spaces. The Department for Children and Families did not have additional comments for that section. So that's why I skipped right past that. And on to the number 5, the identification of a consistent lead agency. For this section, adequate funding needs to be defined so that the department could assess the budgetary impact. This recommendation has workforce and funding implications that were not fully analyzed. The same for number 6. We didn't have any additional comments for this section. Bless you. Number 7, potential adjustments. We need to define relaxed eligibility requirements in order to assess budgetary impact. There is also a natural capacity which will continue to exist until more safe, affordable housing is developed. This gets to, we only have so many hotel and motel rooms available to us. Your section 8, the department was not asked nor had time to complete an analysis as to what it would mean to disregard income contributions. Other entities, such as VSHA, have previously testified that removing all income contributions for long-term vouchers is not in the benefit of the household. I think we saw this during the pandemic. Removing income contributions and resource requirements would mean many Vermonters could be eligible even with substantial resources. There's a budgetary implication that would need to be assessed, but was not requested by the task force. There would have to be infrastructure built around having a savings program, as well as positions to manage the suggestion in B. It was not discussed who would do this or where it would sit. Just to add, it is not currently something that Economic Services oversees in any capacity. Number 9. Periods of ineligibility are an important mechanism to ensure that the safety of everyone in a general assistance emergency housing motel or hotel are being met. The department does not agree that a hotel or motel should carry the burden of having to get a no trespass order in order to have someone leave. Individuals should be asked to leave like any member of the public when their behavior is unacceptable. While the recommendations listed are well-intended, it is not an all-inclusive list, and an additional analysis would be required to provide a comprehensive input. The department would defer to Act 181 for that previous section on housing. Maximum days of eligibility. The department was not asked to provide budgetary or program implications on this section either. Lastly, there are significant budgetary implications in these suggestions, and further details would be needed to fully assess. That is end of our.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there questions? People, I was ready for questions.
I
so-
did too.
Okay, so I guess I'll start off and then I'm sure other people will chime in. Back under the, we don't need to go back to the, specific language, but in the recommendations around resources and not utilizing all of people's resources. And I didn't have a definitive answer from the previous witness around are people who enter shelters run by like, Good Sam or, other folks, are they required to pay for their shelter stay when they're at the shelter? Do they contribute at all?
So I don't believe in Good Sam's example, but I do believe that we have some shelters who maybe don't make you pay for your stay, but they do require that you're putting your income away. So it kind of gets to, I think, the other part that the task force was saying is like, but they want people to have savings to be able to pay first, last in security. But they have that built into their program. So there is some income contribution. It's just where that income is going. It might not pay for their stay, but it is for another purpose.
Okay. So I guess then does the department, I know the department has shelter operations guidelines. Do the guidelines speak to resources?
I don't know the answer to that. Lily Sojourner wanted to be here, but she had a conflict, but we can get back to you on the
Okay.
standards that go into the HOP grants.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about it now. I'm just I think what we're seeing is that depending upon where you happen to, have your head lie, you have different expectations of you, and yet you're both. So I think that's what's sort of cropping up in some of these questions. Let me just, I'll get through mine pretty quickly, I think. Applications and appeals. So, this is more of a comment, I guess. Other agency of human services fair hearing, and I realize that this is mostly with in those situations, but not all, when funded by federal funds. But the requirements to continue services pending the results of appeal. It's kind of like when people are put on administrative leave with pay, you're presumed to be innocent until it's proven otherwise. And so that's something, really, I'm glad you're doing some fiscal analysis of what that potentially would take in there. So it's inconsistent with other practices in the agency, human services. And when we were talking, you were talking about reporting and what the resources might be to do that. Again, I guess this is just maybe a precursor to when we get to looking at the shelter program overall, about looking at what reporting requirements there are for existing community-based shelters and whether that's consistent and how that might be able to add to the reporting that the department is already doing on a monthly basis. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Other ones, but it's getting into more details that we can talk about later. Other questions or comments, Representative Steady and then Representative Garofano.
I have a way of not being able to explain what I want to say. So let's say, is there any protection for the hotel owner? Because let's say a recipient destroys a room in the hotel room, or there's no backup to repair the damage, which will cause the hotel owner to say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore if you're not going to help me, and hurt other people that need that hotel. Because I have to be careful. A hotel will say, I'm not housing anybody anymore. So how do you fix that to back up the hotel room owner so that it doesn't hurt other people that need that hotel when a hotel owner says, don't you even call me again? Just hypothetically.
Unfortunately, it's not hypothetical. It is the reality of what we have to navigate. And I think it's trying to give that ability. And I will say right now, like one of the things, that's why there's shorter authorizations, because people want to understand, is this going to be a good fit or is it not going to be a good fit? And so that they can move people out quickly if it is not going to be a good fit, or have something, like a shorter term to see, are all the service providers going to come that, we have been told we're going to come and try to help support this person. I will also note that if someone stays in a hotel right now, right, it's over $2,000 a month that someone's getting. So hotels are getting quite significant funding to be able to offset when those things do happen to the room.
There is provisions around the definition of behavior and ability for that exist in current program rules. Representative Garofano.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. I was curious, you mentioned for the using the HMIS system as a single database for all recipients. You mentioned the barrier, one of the barriers you mentioned was the reporting requirements that you all have, and that HMIS would not support those reporting requirements. Are those federal reporting requirements, or are those like state report? Like, are there things that we can change? So whatever HMIS gives us would be able to give us the data that we need.
So their state, Act 113 gave us very similar. They wanted the same as when the previous legislation had said, we want to know who's in housing. What are the demographics? Where are they being housed? And so that isn't information in HMIS is one you can put things in, right? So we know how many people have been screened and assessed, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how many older Vermonters I'm housing versus how many people I'm housing because of a natural disaster. And that is information that repeated people want to know. I think, to be able to understand how do you solve that problem, we need to know who we're servicing. So that's the problem. Like HMIS is a tracking system in of itself, and I think works for that intended use. But for us and to add to it, all right, I don't even think like adding to it was considered in that $1 million.
Can it follow up? Sorry. Has there been has DCF done a crosswalk of what HMIS tracks or has capability of tracking and what we need currently that exists?
Yes, and to be able to get information out, if I can give you an example, as a legislator, you can message me today and say, I was wondering what, we have the ability to pull that information out of HMIS. We don't necessarily have that ability to run our own reports with having to go through somebody else. So it becomes delayed in my ability to be able to give information in a timely fashion.
And could you provide that crosswalk to us of what is currently?
Yeah, but I'll have to see when it was done. I know that it might even predate when I was here because our efforts moved from, we worked off of Excel throughout most of the pandemic, and 2 summers ago, we were able to get a system, which I will say HMIS also is in some of the requirements that were implemented or like are outlined here of wanting us to be able to communicate with Vermonters in a fashion that a lot of us are communicated with. We don't even, HMIS isn't going to give that to us, and our current system isn't going to give that to us. But I think HMIS would actually be like a step backwards. But yes, I can look at getting a.
Thank you. Other questions? I think that from listening to the discussion about that, the data system is one, to the extent possible, trying to reduce duplication and to be as comprehensive as possible to answer some of the questions that you're talking about. Other questions or comments from people sitting around the table? All right. Anything you want to say, Mary?
Your work and continue to bring us information about the recommendations, whether it's a fiscal analysis or workforce analysis, which links in with fiscal. There are a lot of underlying issues to making change. So appreciate all the time you've taken to do this. And I know we had Miranda in yesterday on where we currently are, so it's helpful as well. And we look forward to seeing what the House sends us. Great.
Okay, I think we're all set for today. Thank you all. Thank you for